The afternoon sun warmed the central square of New Haven as colonists moved between market stalls. Children laughed near the fountain, while their parents traded goods and shared stories. Amy Patterson carried a basket of fresh vegetables from the hydroponics farm, waving at neighbors as she walked. The colony had grown into a real community over the past 10 years. And days like this reminded everyone why they had left Earth's crowded cities behind. Kyle Morrison sat on a bench near the power station, eating lunch and watching the market from a distance. He preferred the quiet spots, the edges of gatherings rather than the center. Most colonists knew him as the maintenance supervisor who kept the generators running and fixed broken equipment. He was polite but private, helpful but distant. People respected that he kept to himself. Emma Bradley stood in her office overlooking the square, reviewing supply manifests on her datapad. As colony administrator, she handled everything from resource distribution to dispute resolution. It was demanding work, but she loved this place and these people. They had built something good here, far from the politics and pollution of Earth. The alert came through on every datapad simultaneously. Long-range sensors had detected multiple ships entering the system. Emma frowned and opened the comm channel to Greg Sullivan, the chief of colonial security. "Greg, are we expecting a supply run?" she asked. "Negative," Greg replied from the security station. "Nothing scheduled for another 3 months. I'm trying to identify the ships now." Emma felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Unscheduled ships were rarely good news. She watched as people in the square checked their datapads. Confusion spreading through the crowd. 5 minutes passed. Then Greg's voice came through the comm channel, tight with tension. "Emma, you need to see this. Coming to your office now." Greg arrived within 2 minutes, his face pale. He handed Emma his datapad without speaking. She read the sensor data and felt her mouth go dry. 20 ships. All military configuration. All broadcasting Zalkrin identification codes. "No," Emma whispered. "No, they can't be coming here." The Zalkrin were known throughout this sector of space. A reptilian species that conquered worlds for resources and labor. They had taken 12 colony worlds in the past 5 years, turning populations into slaves and stripping planets of anything valuable. Everyone knew the stories. Everyone feared them. "They're hailing us," Greg said quietly. Emma activated the comm system with shaking hands. The screen filled with the image of a Zalkrin commander. His scales were dark green, his eyes cold and calculating. When he spoke, the translation software rendered his words in flat, emotionless tones. "Human colony designated New Haven. This world now belongs to the Zalkrin Empire. You will surrender immediately and prepare for occupation. Any resistance will result in total annihilation of your settlement. You have 1 standard hour to respond." The transmission ended. Emma and Greg stared at the blank screen. "How many troops can they land?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. "Based on those ship classes, at least 10,000 soldiers, probably more." Greg ran his hand through his hair. "Emma, we have 20 security officers with basic pulse rifles. We have no military vehicles, no orbital defenses, no weapons platforms. We have farming equipment and mining tools. How long until help could arrive from Earth? 4 months minimum. And that's if we could even get a message out before they jam our communications." Emma looked out the window at the market square. Children were still playing by the fountain. Parents were still shopping. They had no idea their world was about to end. "Call an emergency assembly," Emma said. "Everyone needs to know what's happening." Within 30 minutes, the square was packed with confused and frightened colonists. Emma stood on the raised platform usually used for community announcements, trying to find words that would make this bearable. There were no such words. She explained the situation as clearly as she could. 20 Zalkrin warships in orbit. 10,000 soldiers ready to deploy. No possibility of military resistance. No hope of rescue in time. The crowd erupted in panic. Parents clutched their children. People shouted questions that had no good answers. Amy Patterson stood near the front, her basket of vegetables forgotten on the ground, tears streaming down her face. "What do we do?" someone shouted. "We can't fight them." "We have to try," another voice called out. We can't just give up. Greg stepped forward. Listen to me. I know every weapon we have in this colony. I know every defensive position. If we fight, they will kill every single person here. Every adult, every child, everyone. We cannot win a military battle against that force. So we become slaves? A man near the back yelled. We work until we die in their labor camps? We survive, Emma said, her voice breaking. We stay alive and hope that someday, somehow, we can get free. But if we fight, there's no hope at all. There's just death. The crowd fell into a terrible, heavy silence. People held each other and wept. The reality was crushing. They had traveled so far, worked so hard, built something beautiful, and now it was all being taken away. Kyle sat in the back row of the assembly, his expression unreadable. He had been listening to every word, watching the fear spread through the crowd like poison. He saw Amy crying. He saw parents holding their children too tight. He saw the defeat in Emma's eyes. Something old and buried stirred inside him, something he had spent 10 years trying to forget. We have 45 minutes to decide, Emma continued. But I don't see any choice. We have to surrender. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. People began to leave the square, walking like shadows toward their homes. Some went to gather family members. Others just wanted to hold their loved ones before the Zalkrin came. Kyle stood slowly and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, 20 warships were preparing to descend. Somewhere up there, 10,000 soldiers were checking their weapons and boarding their transports. He thought about the life he had built here. The quiet mornings, fixing generators, the simple satisfaction of keeping the lights on, the peace he had found after so many years of violence. Then he thought about what the Zalkrin would do to this place, to these people, to Amy and all the others who had welcomed him without questions, who had let him be just Kyle, the maintenance supervisor. He thought about the children who would grow up in labor camps, the families who would be torn apart, the slow death of hope that came with slavery. Kyle walked slowly toward his small house at the edge of the colony. He opened a locked storage container in his closet and looked at contents he hadn't touched in a decade. Combat boots, tactical gear, a small case containing knives that were tools of a trade he had left behind. He didn't take any of it. Those things belonged to a different person, a different life. But the person who had used those things, who had learned those skills, who had done those terrible necessary things in the dark places of the galaxy, that person was still inside him. Dormant but not dead, Kyle closed the container and walked back toward the square. The decision was already made. It had been made the moment the Zalkrin had threatened his home. He would give them one chance to leave. Just one. If they refused, he would remind them why humanity had earned its reputation in the dark corners of space. Why some humans were more dangerous than any weapon. Why the quiet ones were often the most dangerous of all. The Zalkrin ships descended through the atmosphere like falling hammers. Their engines roared across the sky, drowning out every other sound. Colonists stood in doorways and windows, watching their world change forever. The massive troop carriers came down in the open plains 3 kilometers from New Haven, their landing gear crushing the tall grass beneath them. Commander Vex Thor was the first to emerge from the lead ship. He stood 7 feet tall, his dark green scales gleaming in the afternoon sun. He had conquered 17 worlds in his military career, and this one would be no different. Humans were soft creatures who valued comfort over strength. They would surrender quickly. Behind him, 500 Zalkrin soldiers formed ranks with military precision. They wore armor plating over their natural scales and carried plasma rifles that could burn through steel. Heavy weapons platforms rolled down the cargo ramps, and atmospheric fighters screamed overhead in patrol patterns. The show of force was deliberate and overwhelming. Emma watched from her office window as the alien army deployed. The display was designed to break their spirit before the Zalkrin even reached the colony. It was working. She felt the hope drain out of her with each passing minute. We have to go meet them, Greg said beside her. If we make them come to us, they'll be angry. More likely to hurt people. Emma nodded and picked up the white cloth they had prepared. A surrender flag. The most shameful thing she had ever carried. But if it saved lives, she would carry it and bear that shame forever. They gathered a small group of officials and walked toward the edge of the colony. Other colonists fell in behind them, unable to stay in their homes, needing to see what was coming. Soon there were hundreds of people moving toward the central square, drawn by fear and a terrible need to face this together. Kyle stood outside his house, watching the crowd move past. Amy saw him and stopped. "Are you coming?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. Kyle looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. He fell into step beside her, and they joined the flow of people heading toward the square. Vexus Thor led his soldiers toward the colony at a measured pace. Let the humans wait. Let them feel the weight of what was coming. Fear was a useful tool. Terrified populations were easier to control. The square was packed when the Zalkrin arrived. Every colonist who could walk was there, pressed together, seeking comfort in numbers. Parents held children against their legs. Elderly couples gripped each other's hands. Everyone watched the approaching army with expressions ranging from terror to despair. The Zalkrin formed a perimeter around the square, weapons pointed inward at the crowd. The message was clear. You are surrounded. You are helpless. You are ours. Vex Thor strode into the center of the square, his boots loud on the stone pavement. He activated his translation device, and his voice boomed across the silent crowd. Humans of New Haven. Your world now belongs to the Zalkrin Empire. You will be processed and assigned to labor camps. Your resources will be extracted. Your ships and technology will be confiscated. You will work until you are no longer useful. He paused, letting his words sink in. Some colonists sobbed quietly. Others stared at the ground. Compliance will be rewarded with adequate food and shelter. Resistance will be met with execution. These terms are not negotiable. They are your reality from this moment forward. Emma stepped forward with Greg and the other officials. She held the white flag in front of her like a shield against what was happening. We surrender, she said, her voice breaking. Please don't hurt our people. We'll do whatever you ask. Just don't hurt the children. Vex Thor looked at her with something close to satisfaction. This was going exactly as it always did. The leaders would sacrifice their pride to protect their young. It was predictable and useful. You will sign a formal declaration of surrender. Your leaders will be taken as hostages to ensure cooperation. All weapons will be surrendered immediately. All communications equipment will be disabled. You will follow orders without question. Greg's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. What could he say? Everything Vex Thor demanded would happen, whether they agreed or not. The crowd watched their leaders negotiate their slavery. It was the lowest moment in New Haven's short history. 10 years of hope and hard work, ending in submission to an alien empire that saw them as nothing but tools. Then Kyle Morrison started walking forward. At first, no one noticed. He was just another colonist in the crowd. But he didn't stop at the edge where everyone else stood. He kept walking, moving past Emma and Greg, moving toward the Zalkrin commander. Amy saw him first and felt a spike of fear. "Kyle, no," she whispered. But he didn't hear her, or didn't respond. More people noticed. The crowd began to quiet, watching this lone man walk toward 500 armed soldiers. It was suicide. It was insanity. Vex Thor's guards raised their weapons, but the commander held up one hand. He was curious now. What was this human doing? Kyle walked until he was 10 meters from Vex Thor and then stopped. He stood empty-handed, wearing simple work clothes. No weapon, no armor, just a human maintenance worker standing in front of an alien warlord. The square fell completely silent. Not a single voice. Not a single whisper. Everyone was watching. Everyone was holding their breath. Kyle looked up at Vex Thor, meeting the commander's eyes. His expression was completely calm. Not defiant. Not angry. Just calm. Like he was looking at a broken generator he needed to fix. Vex Thor stared back, waiting for this human to speak or attack or do something. The silence stretched out. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Kyle didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, looking at Vex Thor with unwavering focus. The commander felt something unexpected. A flicker of doubt. This human's absolute stillness was unnatural. Prey animals didn't stand like this. Defeated populations didn't produce individuals who looked at conquerors with such calm certainty. "Kneel," Vex Thor commanded, his voice amplified by the translator. Kyle didn't kneel, didn't move at all. "I said kneel," Vex Thor repeated, anger creeping into his tone. "Kneel or I will have you killed where you stand." The crowd gasped. Emma started forward, trying to stop whatever was about to happen, but Greg grabbed her arm. He had pulled up Kyle's file on his datapad. His hands were shaking as he read. "Kneel," Vex Thor said a third time. Kyle finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying across the silent square. "No." That single word seemed to shift something in the air. The soldiers shifted nervously. The colonists leaned forward, not sure what they were witnessing. "You should leave," Kyle continued in that same quiet voice. "Take your ships. Take your soldiers. Leave this world and never come back." Vex's Thor laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. His soldiers joined in, though some of their laughter sounded forced. "You stand alone and unarmed before my army, and you tell me to leave?" Vex Thor shook his head. "You are either brave or insane." "Neither," Kyle said. "I'm just giving you a chance. The only chance you'll get." "A chance?" "A chance to do what?" "To be threatened by one human?" "Tang. A chance to walk away while everyone is still alive," Kyle replied. "While you can still go home to whatever family you have. While your soldiers can still see tomorrow." The laughter died. Something in Kyle's tone made it die. He wasn't making threats. He wasn't posturing. He was stating facts with the same calm certainty that the sky was blue and water was wet. Emma had reached Greg and was reading over his shoulder. Her face went pale as she scrolled through Kyle's military record. The operations, the classifications, the psychological evaluations. "Oh God," she whispered. "What have we been living next to?" Vex Thor studied Kyle more carefully now. The human's stance was relaxed but balanced. His eyes tracked movements with precision that spoke of training. His breathing was controlled, and even despite the tension. "Who are you?" Vex Thor asked, his tone shifting from mockery to genuine question. "Someone who hoped he'd never have to be that person again," Kyle answered. "But you came here. You threatened these people. You threatened the children. You gave me no choice." "One human," Vex Thor said slowly. "What do you think you can do against 500 soldiers? Against 20 warships?" Kyle's expression didn't change. "Whatever is necessary, for as long as it takes, until either everyone here is safe or I'm dead." The way he said it made Vex Thor's combat instincts scream warnings. This wasn't bravado. This wasn't a desperate bluff. This was a promise delivered with absolute conviction. "You would die for these people?" Vex Thor asked. "Yes," Kyle said simply. "But I wouldn't die quickly. And I wouldn't die alone." The silence in the square was total now. Everyone stopped talking. Even the children had gone quiet, sensing something important was happening, even if they didn't understand what. Vex Thor stood facing the lone human, and for the first time in 17 campaigns, he felt uncertain about how to proceed. Vex Thor had faced many enemies across 17 conquered worlds. Warriors, soldiers, desperate defenders of doomed colonies. He knew how to read combat readiness in 100 different species. This human standing before him registered as something his instincts classified as extremely dangerous, even though logic said that was impossible. "You speak of threats you cannot possibly carry out," Vex Thor said, though his tone was more cautious now. "You are one unarmed human." Kyle tilted his head slightly, the first real movement he had made since stopping. "I'm not making threats. I'm giving you information. What you do with that information is your choice." Greg had finished reading Kyle's file. His voice was barely a whisper as he spoke to Emma. "Lieutenant Kyle Morrison, Earth Special Operations Division. Ghost Protocol Team 7. 23 classified operations across hostile territories. Retired with full honors and a recommendation that he never be placed in command of regular forces. Why? Emma asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Psychological evaluation noted extreme capacity for controlled violence, high mission success rate but concerning disregard for personal safety when civilians were at risk. The report says he was too effective, too willing to do whatever the mission required. Emma looked at Kyle standing alone in the square. The quiet maintenance worker who fixed generators and kept to himself. She had never suspected. None of them had. Amy had moved closer and overheard. "What does Ghost Protocol mean?" she asked. Greg didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was hollow. "It means operations that officially never happened. Teams that don't exist on any public record. Missions where success was measured by how many civilians got out alive, regardless of what had to be done to make that happen." Vex's Thor circled Kyle slowly, studying him from different angles. "You have a military background," he said. "I can see it now. But that was years ago. Judging by your age, skills fade. Reflexes slow. You are not what you once were." Probably true, Kyle acknowledged. "But the question isn't whether I'm as good as I used to be. The question is whether I'm still good enough." "Good enough for what?" "To make you regret coming here." A Zalkrin lieutenant stepped forward, his scales a lighter shade of green than Vex Thor's. "Commander, this is wasting time. Let me execute this human, and we can proceed with the occupation." Kyle's eyes shifted to the lieutenant. The movement was casual, but something in his gaze made the younger Zalkrin take an involuntary step back. "You could do that," Kyle said to Vex Thor. "Shoot me right here. You'd win. You'd occupy the colony. Everything would go according to your plan." "I sense a but coming," Vex Thor replied. "But you'd never know if I was bluffing or not. You'd always wonder if maybe, just maybe, I could have done what I said. And late at night, when you're trying to sleep, you'll think about the human who stood in front of your army and showed no fear. You'll wonder what would have happened if you'd listened." Vex Thor's tail lashed behind him, a sign of agitation in Zalkrin body language. "You think you can manipulate me with words? With psychological games? I think you've survived 17 campaigns because you're smart. Because you listen to your instincts. And right now, your instincts are telling you something is wrong here." It was true, and Vex Thor hated that this human had read him so accurately. His instincts were screaming warnings, but his pride and his duty to the Empire demanded he not show weakness before a defeated population. "Tell me," Vex Thor said. "What makes you think you are so dangerous? What is it you believe you can do?" Kyle was quiet for a moment, as if considering whether to answer. When he spoke, his voice was even quieter than before, forcing everyone to strain to hear. "There's an incident in my file called the Kepler Station Affair. Pirates took a mining station. 300 hostages, mostly families. They threatened to kill everyone if their demands weren't met. My team was sent in. The square was absolutely silent. Even the Zalkrin soldiers were listening now. It took 18 hours, Kyle continued. When reinforcements arrived, they found me walking out with the hostages. All 300 of them. Alive. And the pirates? Vex Thor asked, though he already knew the answer. 64 pirates. None of them walked out. Emma felt her blood run cold. She did the math in her head. 1 man against 64 enemies. In a station full of hostages. The logistics alone were impossible. Unless you were willing to do impossible things, the psychological evaluation after that mission is the reason I was retired, Kyle said. They decided I was too dangerous to keep in active service. Too willing to do whatever was necessary. They gave me full honors and suggested I find a quiet life somewhere far away. So you came here, Vex Thor said. So I came here. I fixed generators. I grew vegetables. I tried to forget what I learned in those dark years. I tried to be someone different. So, Kyle's hands opened and closed at his sides, the only sign of emotion he had shown. But you came here and threatened these people. These families, these children, and all those things I tried to forget came flooding back. All those skills, all that training, all the knowledge of how to hurt and kill and make people afraid. He looked directly at Vexthor again. I don't want to be that person again. I came here to escape that. So I'm giving you one chance to help me stay the person I want to be. Leave. Now. And I can go back to fixing generators. And if I refuse, then I become the person I was, the person they trained, the person who did whatever was necessary to protect innocent people. And you'll learn why humans have a reputation in the dark corners of the galaxy, why colonies call for help when they're in trouble, why the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. Vexthor felt the weight of a decision settling on him. He had power here. Overwhelming military force. But this single human had introduced doubt. And doubt was poison to a military operation. You could be lying, Vexthor said. Your file could be fabricated. This could all be an elaborate bluff to buy time. Could be, Kyle agreed. Only one way to find out. The lieutenant spoke again, his voice sharp with frustration. Commander, this is ridiculous. One human is stalling our entire operation. Let me shoot him and end this. Vexthor held up a hand to silence his subordinate. He was thinking. Calculating. His training said, overwhelm the enemy with superior force. But his instincts said, something was very wrong here. I propose a test, Vexthor said finally, to determine if your threats have substance, or if you are simply a clever human buying time. Kyle waited, saying nothing. You. Vexthor pointed at Amy in the crowd. Come forward. Amy's heart nearly stopped. Greg tried to hold her back, but Zalkrin's soldiers moved into the crowd and pulled her forward. She stumbled into the open space, tears streaming down her face. Vexthor gestured to his lieutenant. Prepare to execute this female. If this human is truly as dangerous as he claims, let him stop you. If he cannot, then his threats are empty, and we proceed with the occupation. The crowd erupted in shouts and screams. Emma tried to run forward, but soldiers blocked her path. The lieutenant raised his plasma rifle. Aiming at Amy's head, Kyle moved for the first time since the standoff began. Not toward the lieutenant. Not in a defensive posture. He took one step closer to Vexthor, and his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. If she dies, you die. Right here. Right now. I will kill you before your soldiers can fire a shot. They can kill me after, but you'll be dead. That's not a threat. That's a fact. The absolute certainty in Kyle's voice was chilling. He wasn't angry. He wasn't desperate. He was simply stating what would happen with the same tone someone might use to describe the weather. Vexthor looked into Kyle's eyes and saw something that made his blood run cold. There was no bluff there, no uncertainty. Only the absolute conviction of someone who had made calculations and accepted the cost. The commander had a moment of perfect clarity. This human would die to protect that female. But he wouldn't just die. He would kill first. And Vexthor would be the target. Lieutenant, stand down, Vexthor ordered. But Commander, stand down. The lieutenant lowered his weapon, confusion evident on his face. Amy collapsed to her knees, sobbing with relief. Kyle stepped back to his original position, his eyes never leaving Vexthor's face. You passed your own test, Kyle said quietly. You chose to listen to your instincts. That's why you've survived this long. Vexthor's tail was still now, his posture controlled, but his mind racing. This human had turned the situation around completely. What had started as a simple occupation had become something far more complicated. I could still order the attack, Vexthor said. My forces would overwhelm the colony. You would die like everyone else. Yes, Kyle agreed. But you'd die first. And you know it. The Zalkrin commander stood in silence, facing the lone human who had done the impossible. He had introduced doubt into a certain victory. He had made a conqueror hesitate, and somewhere in that moment, Vexthor realized that conquering this world might cost more than the Empire was willing to pay. Vexthor had never backed down from a challenge. In 17 conquered worlds, he had built a reputation for ruthless efficiency and unwavering resolve. To retreat now would be seen as weakness throughout the Zalkrin military. Yet standing before this human, he felt something he rarely experienced. Genuine uncertainty about the outcome of a confrontation. "You have created an interesting situation," Vexthor said slowly. "I cannot simply leave after deploying my forces. The Empire would see it as cowardice. My soldiers would question my leadership, but I also cannot ignore the tactical concern you represent." Kyle nodded slightly, acknowledging the political reality. "I understand your position. You need a way to withdraw that doesn't look like retreat, or I need to eliminate the threat you represent in a way that confirms my strength," Vexthor countered. The crowd had gone silent again, watching this bizarre negotiation between the lone human and the alien commander. Greg kept his hand on Amy's arm, keeping her from running to Kyle's side. Emma stood frozen, trying to process what was happening. "I have a proposal," Vexthor announced loudly, addressing both Kyle and the gathered colonists. "A challenge that honors both our positions. Single combat. You and I, unarmed, to keep it fair for your human limitations." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Zalkrin soldiers shifted, some looking interested, others skeptical. "If I win," Vexthor continued, "your colony surrenders without further resistance. You will work for the Empire, but I will ensure better conditions than standard occupation terms. Family units remain together. No executions for past defiance. Reasonable work quotas." "And if I win?" Kyle asked. "If you win, my forces withdraw. We leave this world and report that New Haven is unsuitable for occupation due to unforeseen complications. The Empire will not return." Kyle studied the Zalkrin commander. The offer was better than he had expected. Even in defeat, the colonists would be treated relatively well, but victory meant freedom. "You're 7 feet tall," Kyle observed. "You have natural armor plating, greater strength, and you've killed opponents in ritual combat before. I can see the scarring on your scales." "Yes," Vexthor agreed, "which makes my offer generous. I give you a chance you do not deserve, and in return, you give my forces a way to leave with honor if you somehow prevail." "You think I can't win?" "I think the odds favor me considerably," Vexthor said. "But you have made me uncertain, and I do not like uncertainty. This combat will resolve the question definitively." Kyle was silent for a long moment. Emma found her voice and shouted from the crowd. "Kyle! No! You can't fight him! Look at him! He'll kill you!" Kyle glanced back at her. "If I don't fight him, you all become slaves. If I fight and lose, you become slaves with better conditions. If I fight and win, you're free. The math is simple." "The math says you die," Emma shouted back, her voice breaking. "Maybe," Kyle acknowledged. "But at least I die trying to save you instead of watching you be taken." Amy pulled free from Greg and ran toward Kyle. She grabbed his arm, her face streaked with tears. "Please don't do this. We'll survive the labor camps. We'll find a way. But we can't watch you die." Kyle looked down at her, and for the first time since the confrontation began, his expression softened slightly. "Amy, I spent 20 years learning how to protect people, how to stand between innocents and the things that want to hurt them. I came here to forget that life. But maybe this is why I came. Maybe this is what all that training was for." "You're just one person," Amy whispered. "One person can be enough if they're willing to do what's necessary." He gently removed her hand from his arm and turned back to Vexthor. "I accept your challenge. Single combat. Unarmed. Winner determines the fate of the colony." Vexthor nodded, something like respect flickering in his expression. "Clear the center of the square. Make a circle. This will be witnessed by all." The Zalkrin soldiers moved quickly, pushing colonists back and marking out a wide circle in the center of the square. The combat area was perhaps 20 meters across, plenty of room for 2 fighters to move. Greg had his datapad out again, frantically searching through Kyle's file for any information that might help. "It says here you were trained in multiple martial disciplines, Earth combat systems, alien combat techniques, improvised fighting methods." Kyle shrugged out of his work jacket, leaving him in just a plain shirt and work pants. Training from 20 years ago. I'm older now. Slower. But you think you can win? Kyle looked at the Zalkrin commander, who was removing his own equipment and ceremonial armor, leaving only his natural scales. I think I have to try. Vexthor stepped into the circle, and the size difference was staggering. He towered over Kyle, his muscled body covered in thick protective scales. His arms were longer, his reach superior. Everything about the matchup favored the alien warrior. Kyle stepped into the circle opposite him. He looked small, human, vulnerable. The crowd pressed close to the circle's edge, unable to look away even though they dreaded what they were about to witness. Parents covered their children's eyes. Others held each other and prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Combat begins when I give the signal, Vexthor announced. It ends when one fighter cannot continue or yields. There are no other rules. He looked at Kyle one last time. You can still yield now and avoid pointless death. No, Kyle said simply. Let's finish this. Vexthor raised his hand and then dropped it sharply. The combat began. The Zalkrin commander moved first, closing the distance with surprising speed for his size. His training was evident in every movement, disciplined and efficient. He threw a powerful strike at Kyle's head, putting his superior strength behind it. Kyle ducked under the blow and circled away, his movements economical and precise. He didn't counterattack. He was studying, learning. Vexthor pressed the attack, throwing combinations designed to overwhelm and corner his opponent. Kyle dodged and blocked, absorbing hits on his arms and shoulders when he couldn't avoid them entirely. Each impact would have broken bones in a normal human, but Kyle's conditioning and technique minimized the damage. The crowd watched in horrified fascination. For the first few minutes, it looked like Kyle was simply delaying the inevitable. He was on the defensive, giving ground, taking punishment. But Emma, watching closely, began to notice something. Kyle's movements were becoming smoother, more confident. He was learning Vexthor's patterns, adapting to the alien's fighting style. He's studying him, Greg whispered. He's letting Vexthor attack, so he can learn how he moves. Vexthor noticed it too. This human was more skilled than expected. The way he positioned his feet, the efficiency of his defense, the way he measured distance. This was not amateur fighting. You have training, Vexthor acknowledged between strikes. Real training. Yes, Kyle replied, still mostly defending. And I learned early that the best way to beat a superior opponent is to let them teach you their weaknesses. Then Kyle shifted from defense to offense, and the nature of the fight changed completely. His first strike was a precise kick to Vexthor's knee joint, targeting the gap in the scales. The Zalkrin commander grunted in pain and stumbled slightly. Before he could recover, Kyle was already moving, flowing from one technique to another with practiced efficiency. He targeted vulnerable points, the joints where scales met, the throat, the eyes. He didn't try to match Vexthor's strength. Instead, he used the alien's mass and momentum against him, redirecting attacks and creating openings. The crowd gasped as Kyle landed a sharp strike to Vexthor's ribs, finding another gap in the scales. The commander roared and swung wildly, but Kyle was already gone, circling to a better position. This was what Kyle had been trained to do. Fight opponents who were bigger, stronger, better armed. Find the weaknesses. Exploit them ruthlessly. Never stop moving. Never stop thinking. Vexthor adjusted his tactics, becoming more cautious. He had underestimated this human. That was dangerous against any opponent. Potentially fatal against one this skilled. They circled each other now, both breathing hard. Vexthor had landed solid hits, and Kyle's face was bruised, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. But the Zalkrin commander was limping slightly, favoring his damaged knee, and breathing more heavily than before. You are better than expected, Vexthor admitted. This will be closer than I thought. I told you, Kyle replied, his voice steady despite his injuries. The question was never if I could fight. The question was if I was still good enough. And are you? Kyle's eyes hardened. Let's find out. He attacked again, this time with no hesitation, no holding back. 20 years of rust fell away as muscle memory took over. His body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. The training, the techniques, the 1,000 small skills that separated soldiers from killers. Vex Thor defended desperately now, realizing too late that he had made a terrible mistake. This human wasn't just skilled, he was exceptional. The kind of warrior who appeared once in a generation, regardless of species. Kyle landed a devastating combination of strikes, each one precisely placed, each one pushing the Zalkrin commander closer to defeat. Vex Thor tried to mount a counteroffensive, but Kyle was always one step ahead, reading his movements, anticipating his actions. Then Kyle swept the damaged leg, and Vex's Thor crashed to the ground. Before the commander could rise, Kyle was on him, one hand positioned at his throat, ready to deliver a killing strike. The square fell absolutely silent. Kyle looked down at Vex Thor, his hand positioned to crush the alien's windpipe. One quick motion and it would be over. Yield, Kyle said quietly. Vex Thor looked up at the human, seeing his own death reflected in those calm eyes, and made his choice. Vex Thor lay on the ground, Kyle's hand positioned to end his life with a single strike. The Zalkrin commander had been in combat many times, had faced death before, but never like this. Never so completely, so decisively. He was utterly defeated, and everyone watching knew it. I yield, Vex Thor said, the words bitter but necessary. Kyle held his position for another moment, making sure the surrender was genuine, then stood and stepped back. He extended his hand downward, offering to help the commander up. The gesture surprised everyone. Zalkrin soldiers raised their weapons, uncertain how to respond. The colonists held their breath. Vex Thor stared at the offered hand, confused by this show of respect from a victor. Slowly, Vex Thor reached up and grasped Kyle's hand. The human pulled him to his feet, and they stood facing each other in the center of the circle. Blood dripped from cuts on both fighters. They were breathing hard, bodies marked by the violence of combat. You won, Vex Thor said simply. I did not think it possible, but you won. You fought well, Kyle replied. You're skilled and experienced. On another day, the outcome might have been different. No. Vex Thor shook his head. I see it now. You were always going to win. You have something we don't often encounter. Absolute conviction. You were willing to die if necessary, but you were also willing to do whatever it took to survive and protect your people. That makes you more dangerous than any weapon. The commander turned to face his assembled troops, who stood in stunned silence. Their undefeated commander had been beaten by a single human. It was unthinkable. Yet they had all witnessed it. The terms of combat are honored. Vex Thor announced loudly. This world is unsuitable for occupation. We withdraw immediately. The lieutenant who had wanted to execute Amy earlier stepped forward, his posture aggressive. Commander, this is madness. We have superior numbers, superior firepower. We could still take this colony. 3-4 point the colony force bow. At what cost? Vex Thor asked, his tone sharp. You saw what one human did to me. I am your commander, trained in combat since birth, veteran of 17 campaigns. And I was defeated. Now imagine if every human in this colony fought like that. Imagine if more humans like him arrived to help. He gestured at Kyle. This is why humanity is dangerous. They don't look impressive. They're not the strongest or fastest. But they have something in them, something that makes them capable of extraordinary acts when protecting what they love. We came here expecting soft colonists. We found a warrior who had been pretending to be something else. The lieutenant still looked mutinous. But other soldiers were nodding. They had seen the fight. They understood. Vex Thor turned back to Kyle. I have a question before we leave. When you had me on the ground, when you could have killed me easily, why didn't you? Kyle was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because the fight was already won. Killing you would have been revenge, not necessity. I learned a long time ago that violence should only be used when there's no other choice. You gave me a choice. By yielding, you showed me mercy. I showed you the same respect any warrior deserves. You gave your word about the terms. You honored them. That matters more than revenge. Vex Thor studied Kyle with new understanding. You are not like other soldiers I have known. Most would have taken the kill. The glory. The certainty that their enemy was gone. I stopped being a soldier a long time ago, Kyle said. I came here to be something better. Someone who fixes things instead of breaking them. You gave me a reason to remember the old skills. But I don't have to become that person entirely. I can still choose mercy when possible. The Zalkrin commander bowed slightly, a gesture of respect in his culture. You are a strange human, Kyle Morrison. But I am glad I met you. You have taught me something valuable today. What's that? That there are worse things than tactical retreat. Pride can kill you if you're not careful. My pride nearly killed me today. Vex Thor ordered his troops to return to their ships. The withdrawal began immediately. Soldiers marching back toward the landing zone with their weapons lowered. The colonists watched in disbelief as the massive army that had terrified them simply turned and left. Emma ran to Kyle, followed by Greg and Amy and dozens of others. They crowded around him, everyone trying to thank him at once, to celebrate, to process what they had just witnessed. You saved us, Emma said, tears streaming down her face. You saved everyone. Kyle accepted their gratitude quietly, uncomfortable with the attention. I just did what needed to be done. You fought an alien commander in single combat and won, Greg said, shaking his head. That's going to be a story told across every human colony. I'd rather it wasn't, Kyle replied. I'd rather just go back to fixing generators. Amy was crying and laughing at the same time. She hugged Kyle tightly despite his protests. You scared me to death. I thought you were going to die. Huh. So did I, Kyle admitted. He was better than I expected. I got lucky. That wasn't luck, Emma said firmly. That was skill and courage and everything we needed in that moment. The crowd wanted to celebrate, to throw a party, to proclaim Kyle a hero. But Kyle extracted himself from the attention as soon as he could. Claiming he needed medical attention for his injuries, Amy insisted on accompanying him to the medical center. As they walked, Amy spoke quietly. You're not going to tell us about your past, are you? About what you did before you came here? No, Kyle said. That person is gone. Or at least, I want him to be gone. Today was necessary, but I don't want to be him again. But you were incredible. You saved us all. I did what I was trained to do. But that training came from dark places, Amy. From missions where people died and hard choices had to be made. I came here to leave all that behind. And now everyone knows what you're capable of. They'll always see you differently, Kyle sighed. I know. But maybe that's okay. Maybe keeping the people I care about safe is worth being seen as something other than just a maintenance worker. They reached the medical center, where a doctor treated Kyle's injuries. Nothing was broken. But he had extensive bruising and several cuts that needed cleaning. The doctor worked in awed silence, clearly wanting to ask questions, but not daring to. Meanwhile, at the landing zone, Vex Thor supervised the withdrawal. His second-in-command approached, speaking quietly so others wouldn't hear. The troops are questioning your decision, Commander. They say we could have won despite the combat outcome. They're wrong, Vex Thor replied. That human showed me something important. This colony isn't just farmers and families. It's a place that produced someone like Kyle Morrison. Or maybe it's a place that attracted someone like him because it was worth protecting. I don't understand. Humans are strange, Vex Thor explained. They seem weak until you threaten something they love. Then they become capable of things you wouldn't believe. We have stories about Deathworld species, about warriors from harsh planets. Earth is one of those worlds. We forgot that. He looked back toward the colony. where celebrations were beginning as colonists realized they were truly safe. If we had proceeded with the occupation, how many more Kyle Morrisons would have appeared? How many colonists would have fought like him when their families were threatened? This conquest would have cost us hundreds, maybe thousands of soldiers. And for what? One small colony? The second-in-command nodded slowly, beginning to understand. You made a tactical decision. I made a smart decision. Sometimes the best victory is the one you walk away from. The last Zalkran ship lifted off 3 hours later. The colony watched them go, hardly believing it was over. When the ships jumped to hyperspace and disappeared from the sensors, a cheer erupted across New Haven that could probably be heard in orbit. Kyle sat in his small house at the edge of the colony, an ice pack on his ribs, listening to the celebration in the distance. He felt tired. Old. The fight had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. 20 years of peace had made him soft. Even if the skills remained, a knock on his door made him sigh. He knew the celebrations would eventually come to him. He opened the door, expecting a crowd, and found just Emma standing there. "Can I come in?" she asked. Kyle nodded and let her enter. They sat in his small kitchen, the sounds of celebration distant but constant. "The colony council met," Emma said. "We want to officially thank you. Maybe name something after you. The square where you made your stand, perhaps." "Please don't," Kyle said immediately. "I don't want monuments. I just want to go back to my normal life." "Kyle, your life here will never be normal again. Everyone knows what you did, what you're capable of. You can't put that back in the box." "I can try." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something? When you were standing there facing 500 soldiers, were you scared?" "Terrified," Kyle admitted. "I thought I was going to die. I thought we all were. Dead. But you did it anyway. Because the alternative was watching you all become slaves, watching children grow up in labor camps. Some things are worth dying for. We owe you everything," Emma said softly. "Our freedom. Our families. Our future. There's no way to repay that. You don't owe me anything. This is my home too. I was protecting my home." Emma smiled. "See, that's why you're not like other warriors. You don't see it as heroism. You see it as just doing what needed to be done. Because that's all it was." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the celebration. Finally, Emma stood to leave. "One more thing," she said at the door. "Vex Thor sent a message before he left. He said to tell you that you taught him something important today. About mercy and strength. And knowing when to walk away." "What did you say back?" "I said maybe he taught you something too. About facing your past and accepting who you were, even if it's not who you want to be now." After Emma left, Kyle sat alone in his kitchen, thinking about her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe today wasn't about becoming the person he used to be. Maybe it was about accepting that both versions of himself could exist, the warrior and the peacekeeper, and knowing when each one was needed. The next morning, life in New Haven slowly returned to normal. The market opened. Children went to school. People went to work. Kyle reported to the power station and spent the day fixing a malfunctioning generator, same as always. But things were different too. People waved at him more. Said thank you for small things. Parents pointed him out to their children, explaining that he was the reason they were free. Kyle accepted it all with quiet grace, neither seeking attention nor hiding from it. He was who he was, a man with a violent past who had found peace, who had been forced to remember that violence briefly, but who chose to return to peace when given the option. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. News of New Haven's defense spread through colonial networks. Other settlements heard about the lone human who faced down an invading army and won through courage and skill. The story grew with each telling, becoming legend. But on New Haven, Kyle remained just Kyle. The maintenance supervisor who fixed things and kept to himself. Who occasionally sat at the market with Amy, watching children play. Who smiled quietly when people thanked him but never asked for recognition. The quiet ones, people learned, were often the most dangerous. But they were also often the most important. Because when darkness came, when threats emerged, they were the ones who stood up when others couldn't. They were the ones who did what was necessary, no matter the cost. They were the ones who protected the light, even if they themselves had seen too much darkness. And sometimes, that was exactly what the world needed.